He was worth billions. Private jets. Glass towers. A name that moved markets. And one careless joke. In a small roadside diner. Nearly exposed the one thing money could not buy. He mocked a waitress by asking her for financial advice. The room laughed. But when she answered, no one made a sound. Because in one sentence, she saw through the suit, through the success, through the empire, and reminded him of the hungry warehouse boy he had buried under ambition. What happened next did not just change his company. It forced a billionaire to risk everything. His power, his reputation, his fortune, for a promise he once broke, and a lesson he never learned. Stay with me. Because this is not just a story about wealth. It is about betrayal, redemption, sacrifice, and the one decision that proved whether he was truly rich or simply wealthy. I was not born into wealth. I was born into debt. My father lost our home before I turned 12. I still remember the smell of damp cardboard, and my mother folding clothes into borrowed boxes. By 16, I worked nights at a warehouse, where the air tasted like rust and sweat. I promised myself I would never live small again. Years later, I built a company from nothing. With blistered hands and an empty stomach. I slept on office floors. I drank tap water to silence hunger. When investors betrayed me, and partners walked away with my ideas, I learned that success has sharp teeth. But I bit back. By 38, magazines called me a billionaire. They did not print the nights I cried in silence, or the mornings I stared at the mirror and saw a tired, hardened man. The night everything changed, I sat in a small roadside diner, waiting for a delayed flight. She refilled my coffee. Her name was Elena. Simple apron. Steady eyes. I asked her, half amused, if you had $100 million, how would you invest it? The men at my table laughed. She did not. She looked at me, as if she saw the warehouse boy beneath the tailored suit. I would invest in the people who stayed when you had nothing, she said softly. Because money grows fastest in grateful hands. The room fell silent. Her words struck deeper than any market loss. She did not know my story. Yet she understood my emptiness. I began returning to that diner. Not for the coffee. For her courage. She worked double shifts to pay her mother's medical bills. She saved every dollar. She dreamed quietly. When a recession threatened my empire, and my board demanded ruthless layoffs, I felt the old hunger rising again. Cut fast. Protect profit. Survive alone. That night, Elena held my shaking hands across a chipped wooden table. Build something that feeds others, she whispered, or your wealth will starve you. The next morning, I walked into the boardroom with a decision that risked everything. I walked into the boardroom with a decision that risked everything. The skyline glowed behind glass walls. Cold. Polished. Unforgiving. My executives waited with spreadsheets that reduced human lives to percentages. Cut 12,000 jobs. My chief officer said, our margins will recover in 1 quarter. 12,000 families. Rent. Medicine. School shoes. I felt 16 again. Warehouse dust in my lungs. Fear sitting heavy in my ribs. Elena's voice echoed inside me. Build something that feeds others. My palms were damp. My heart pounded so loudly. I feared they could hear it. We will not cut them, I said. Silence. Then outrage. Investors threatened revolt. Board members questioned my sanity. One called me sentimental. The vote was split. I stood alone, at the head of a billion-dollar table, and chose people over profit. We restructured. We cut executive bonuses. I cut my own salary to $1. The media called it reckless. Stocks fell. For months, I barely slept. I tasted metal in my mouth every time the market opened. Elena stayed. She brought me homemade soup when I forgot to eat. She read every article and reminded me who I was becoming. Fear builds walls, she told me. Faith builds futures. Then something shifted. Employees worked harder than ever. Innovation bloomed from departments I had almost erased. Customers noticed. They trusted us more. Slowly, painfully, the numbers began to rise. 1 year later, profits doubled what they once were. The same investors who doubted me praised my leadership. But that was not the victory. The victory was walking through our headquarters and seeing families still intact. The victory was Elena standing beside me as I announced a foundation to fund worker education and healthcare. I asked her to marry me in the same diner where she silenced my arrogance. She smiled through tears and said yes. Yet even as success expanded beyond anything I imagined, a letter arrived on my desk that threatened to unravel everything we had built. The letter was plain. No logo. No signature. Inside was a single page and a photograph. The photograph showed me at 16, standing behind a warehouse truck. Beside me was Marcus, my closest friend, my first partner. The letter read, "You built an empire on an idea that was not yours alone." My throat tightened. Marcus and I had dreamed together, under flickering warehouse lights. We sketched plans on torn cardboard. We promised equal futures. But when investors came, they chose me, not him. I told myself it was business, that he lacked polish, that I would repay him someday. Someday never came. The letter claimed Marcus was ill, that he had struggled while I rose, that the foundation of my success rested on a silence I never corrected. My hands trembled. The room felt smaller. Elena found me staring at the photograph. I confessed everything. The ambition, the fear, the choice that favored survival over loyalty. She did not accuse me. She listened. Pain moved across her face, like a slow shadow. "Greatness is not measured by what you build," she said quietly. "It is measured by what you repair." That night I did not sleep. I saw Marcus laughing beside me, sharing his last sandwich, believing in us. The next morning, I asked my assistant to find him. Hours passed. When the call finally came, the word struck harder than any market crash. Marcus had refused charity. He said he wanted only one thing from me. Marcus had refused charity. He said he wanted only one thing from me. Not money. Not shares. Not public recognition. He wanted me to come alone. No lawyers. No press. No assistants. Just me. The address led to a modest rehabilitation center on the edge of the city. The building smelled of antiseptic and boiled vegetables. Walls painted a tired shade of cream. I felt smaller with every step down the corridor. When I entered his room, I almost did not recognize him. Time had carved lines into his face. Illness had thinned his frame. But his eyes were the same. Steady. Knowing. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence carried years of distance. I watched you on television, he said finally. You became everything we imagined. We. The word pierced me. I should have fought for you, I replied. My courage arrived too late. He studied me carefully. I never hated you, he said. I hated the part of myself that believed I was not enough. The weight in my chest shifted. He told me he had started small projects of his own. Community workshops. Mentoring young men from broken homes. No headlines. No investors. Just quiet impact. I wanted you to see, he continued. That success does not belong to one face. My eyes burned. I built towers, I said softly. You built people. He smiled faintly. I wanted you here because I needed to know. If the boy from the warehouse was still inside the billionaire. I stepped closer. Took his fragile hand. He never left, I whispered. Marcus closed his eyes, relieved. There is one more thing, he said. His voice barely above breath. And what he asked of me next would test every promise I had ever made. There is one more thing, he said. His voice barely steady. I want you to hand the company to the people who built it. Not just in words. In ownership. The room felt suddenly airless. Years of expansion. Negotiations. Risk. Control had been my shield. To give them equity? I asked quietly. To trust them, Marcus replied. The way we once trusted each other. His fingers tightened around mine. Weak. But certain. If you truly believe wealth should feed others, prove it. The old fear rose again. Investors would resist. The board would panic. Markets hate uncertainty. Yet I saw something else. Warehouse lights. Shared sandwiches. Dreams spoken without ego. I left the center shaken. Elena waited in the car. She saw my face. And understood without explanation. He asked you to become braver than your balance sheet, she said softly. That night we sat at our kitchen table. No assistants. No reports. Just 2 cups of tea. And the weight of decision. If you lose everything, she asked gently. I will still have you, I answered. She reached across the table. And pressed her forehead to mine. Then you are already wealthy. The next week. I called an emergency board meeting. Executives arrived tense. Rumors had spread. I stood before them. With a proposal that would redefine ownership. Employee shares. Voting power. Profit participation. Not symbolic. Substantial. Gasps filled the room. One director warned of collapse. Another threatened resignation. I listened. Then I thought of Marcus. Waiting for proof. I cast my vote first. For trust. The decision passed by a narrow margin. Markets reacted violently. Stock prices trembled. Headlines questioned my sanity again. But inside the company, something extraordinary began to stir. But inside the company, something extraordinary began to stir. It started quietly. An engineer who once kept ideas to himself, now stayed late, refining a design he believed in. A single mother in accounting proposed a cost strategy that saved millions. Factory workers gathered after shifts, brainstorming improvements, as if the walls finally belonged to them. Because now they did. Ownership changed posture, changed tone, changed pride. I walked the production floor one evening. No cameras. No announcement. Hands were stained with grease. Faces were tired. But eyes were alive. A man stopped me. I bought my first home this month, he said. My daughter has her own room. His voice broke. I felt something inside me heal. That money had never touched. The stock price stabilized. Then climbed. Analysts called it revolutionary. Business schools requested interviews. But the real miracle was not financial. It was cultural. Trust multiplied faster than profit ever had. Marcus watched the transformation from his hospital bed. I sent him updates each week. One afternoon, he asked me to visit again. When I entered his room, the machines sounded louder. His strength was fading. Tell me, he whispered. Did they believe you? Yes, I said. They believed us. A faint smile touched his lips. Then promise me one last thing, he murmured. Elena stood beside me. Her hand wrapped around mine. Marcus looked at both of us with the calm of a man who had finished his work. What I ask next, he said slowly, will require more than courage. It will require sacrifice. And as I leaned closer to hear him, I felt the future shifting once more. What I ask next, he said slowly, is that you never let this become about you again. His breath was fragile. Build leaders. Then step aside. The words settled into me with a weight far greater than profit or loss. For years, I had fought to prove myself, to outrun poverty, to silence doubt. Now I was being asked to release the very throne I had bled to earn. Marcus squeezed my hand once more. Legacy is not control, he whispered. It is continuity. Days later, he was gone. The city moved as usual. Markets opened. Traffic roared. But something inside me had grown quiet. At the next annual meeting, in a hall filled with shareholders and employees, I made the final decision of my career. I announced my transition from chief executive to mentor and chairman. Leadership would rise from within. Voices once overlooked would now guide the future. There was shock. Then applause. Not for me. For what we had become. That evening, Elena and I returned to the small diner, where she first silenced my arrogance. The bell on the door still rang too loudly. The coffee still tasted slightly burnt. But I tasted gratitude instead. I had built towers of glass and steel. Yet the greatest structure I ever built was trust. Wealth once felt like survival. Then it felt like power. Now it felt like responsibility. Elena rested her hand over mine. You are free now, she said softly. And I understood at last. True success is not measured by how high you rise, but by how many hands you lift with you. Money can make a person rich, but humility, courage, and love make a life meaningful.